Hi everyone, Petrik here. For today's video, this will be a book review for The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. You are not in the unseen world. Yes, I am indeed continuing my journey with reading The Wheel of Time, and The Flaming Tavern has pulled me back into reading this series again. But before you proceed with watching this video, I do hope that you know who the Dragon Reborn is first, because I will be talking about it. I think it's very obvious who the Dragon Reborn is from reading the first book, Eye of the World. As for this review, believe me that no one is more surprised by this turn of events than I am. Not only did I actually continue reading The Wheel of Time, but I actually ended up enjoying The Fires of Heaven, the fifth book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. For the past 2.5 years, I was uncompromising in voicing my disappointment with The Shadow Rising, and I still stand by my words that The Shadow Rising totally disappointed me. But since then, deep inside, there was still a part of me that had been tainted by the sweetness and danger of Saidin, and that part of me is determined to finish the series no matter what or no matter how long it takes. Then last year, the TV show adaptation came out, and the final episode of the first season was, in my opinion, so bad that it actually put the books in a much better light for me. Plus, taking a break from the series for years helped a lot. One of the things that decreased my experience of reading The Shadow Rising the most was my ridiculously high expectation towards it. For years before I started reading The Wheel of Time, I heard from many fans of the series that The Shadow Rising is the best book in the series that's written by Robert Jordan. I failed to shake that notion and expectation when I entered that book. With The Fires of Heaven, I didn't have all that expectations coming into it, and I more or less knew what I'm getting into. Because of this, I felt like I could appreciate the good and the flaws of the series equally. Or maybe The Fires of Heaven is just overall a superior book than The Shadow Rising for me. The story in The Fires of Heaven continues from where The Shadow Rising ended. Right from the beginning, I was pleasantly surprised by what I was reading. I never expected I would end up devouring the first quarter of this 350,000 words novel so quickly, but that transpired. The Fires of Heaven is an incredibly character-driven novel. The slow pacing of the series persisted in this novel, and there were a few sections in the middle of the book where it did feel difficult to continue. I will get to that later. But I just love reading Randall Thor's POV chapters in The Fires of Heaven so much more than I expected. It may have taken 5 novels to get to this development, but I found it refreshing to see Rand learning and using more of his power as the Dragon Reborn. More importantly, even though Rand can be categorized as arrogant in this book, I think it's not wrong for him to act and behave as he did. For the past 4 books, every faction and everyone insisted on using Rand for their own benefit, and that situation continues to this novel. It was super satisfying to see him becoming more of a leader and standing his ground strong in many instances instead of constantly being led around like a puppet. I mean, Rand is the Dragon Reborn. He could destroy or save the world. I can't stop thinking about Bellfire and the implication of its power we get to witness here. And guess what? Rand's story wasn't even my utmost favorite section in The Fires of Heaven. It's Matrim Cotton's POV chapters. I'm trying my best not to raise my own expectation here, but I must say, I absolutely enjoyed reading Matt's POV chapters in The Fires of Heaven. Despite his relatively few appearances here, the impact of what he achieved raised his potential to become my favorite character in the series. Matt ranged from underwhelming to okay in the past 4 books, in my opinion. It felt like Jordan didn't know what to do with his story arc yet. Or maybe Jordan did know, but it took him 5 books for Matt's character arc to really begin. If this is the first time you're watching my review, I've mentioned constantly that reluctant heroes have always been one of my favorite types of main characters to read, and Matt fully embodied this. His determination to try to escape the pattern he's pushed into was understandable. I actually felt bad for him and the streak of bad luck he encountered. But luck, good or bad, has always been a part of his life. Gambling is deep inside Matt, and reading the implementation of the new abilities he has acquired to turn the tide in his favor was a fist-pumping moment. This and the creation of the Band of the Red Hand, plus the ending sequence of the book, were my favorite parts of the entire novel. I loved it, and I look forward to the next chapter of his story and development. Other than Rand and Matt, I also loved being exposed to learning about the Aiel culture. Jordan's world building has always been something that I admire about the series, and The Fires of Heaven expanded upon this further. I also think most of the supporting characters played a role in enriching my reading experience, and as I just mentioned, the final quarter of The Fires of Heaven was well written and exciting. Honestly, I love to continue to the next book immediately, but I will not make the same mistake I did a few years back when I tried to binge read this series for the first time. All of these praises, however, do not mean that I thoroughly love The Fires of Heaven. As I said at the beginning of this review, this is a book that's also filled with noticeable flaws. I just enjoyed it despite them. Perrin is completely absent in The Fires of Heaven. I genuinely do not mind Perrin's lack of appearance. Perrin is simply not a memorable main character at this stage of the series yet. In exchange for Perrin, we get a lot of Nynaeve's, and I have several problems with this. Nynaeve continues her status of being one of the most infuriating characters I've ever read in fantasy here. Yes, I know that she is a strong-willed character, but there were too many moments where I seriously just wanted to bash her head in and tell her to shut up, listen, and start admitting your own mistakes. Egwene lecturing Nynaeve made me internally scream with joy. Female characters, especially Nynaeve, continue to undermine men every step of their way. I stand by my words that Jordan wrote some of the worst romance in fantasy. I am not sure whether it is appropriate to call them romance. They all just happen without proper build-up or developments. They were all totally random and impossible to understand. Then there is also the boring circus and also Elaine's line of thoughts towards Tom, which confused the heck out of me. And then Aviendha's never-ending tantrum and mood swing. Frankly, the only parts I enjoyed reading in Nynaeve's and Elaine's chapters were the events in the Unseen World and Uno. What a bloody riot, Uno. But the problems in this series are still evident in this installment. If you struggled with them as I did, do not expect them to disappear with this book. Jordan frequently relied on traveling sections, overly detailed descriptions, and repetitive explanations to fill the pages of his series. These undoubtedly affect the pacing in the middle parts of The Fires of Heaven. I also preferred the action sequence to be longer and more vivid. I found Jordan's prose during his descriptions of the clothing and setting way too detailed for its own good sometimes, and unfortunately not detailed enough during the battle scenes. I did, however, get what I wanted from the action scenes in the final quarter of the novel. So overall, what really changed for me? How was I able to tolerate these issues now? First, regarding the female characters' behaviors, I suggest to just accept them for what they are and maybe treating their antics and behaviors as a running joke in the series. I am sorry, but that's the only method I could apply to my reading experience in order to barely understand why they needed to be that long. Accept their antics seriously, it would just drive me nuts and insane. As for pacing issues, taking a break from the series feels mandatory to me. Based on my experience with reading The Wheel of Time, I don't think I would be able to tolerate the flaws if I had binge read the series like I did almost 3 years ago. By taking a break between books, I felt like I was able to successfully embrace the goods, acknowledging but not being too infuriated by the flaws of the series. But at the end of the day, this could all just be because The Fires of Heaven is indeed a superior book than The Shadow Rising for me. I know that this is an unpopular opinion. I seldom heard people consider The Fires of Heaven as one of the best books in the series that's written by Robert Jordan, not the one that's written by Brandon Sanderson. Personally speaking, The Fires of Heaven is at least as good as The Great Hunt. It is my favorite book in the series so far. Right now, I cannot determine when I will finish the series, but I do know that I will be reading The Lord of Chaos within this year, and hopefully the 7th book, The Crown of Swords as well. Going further beyond that within this year might be pushing my luck, but we'll see. However, this long review is just a long way of me saying that The Wheel of Time, I am back. You win again, Tavern. And I look forward to Dance with Jacko the Shadows. So yeah, that's my review for The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan, and this is me officially saying that I am continuing my journey and my ambition to finish The Wheel of Time. Thank you so much to all of you who have encouraged me and also gave me advice to continue reading the series without actually undermining my opinion with The Shadow Rising and the series. It's only because of you that I'm able to continue reading The Wheel of Time, and I don't regret this one bit. The Fires of Heaven is great. And I look forward to reading The Lord of Chaos sometime within this year, probably within May or June, we'll see. If you have read The Wheel of Time up to this book, let me know your thoughts on The Fires of Heaven and which book in the series so far is your favorite. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye.